What are the 7 dumbest things that I have seen business owners do? Kevin Ware, your action business coach, helping you achieve your business dreams. I have been coaching for over 22 years. I have worked with literally thousands of businesses in different situations. And I've identified the 7 dumbest things that I have seen business owners do in those 22 plus years. Some of these have been clients. Some of these have been prospective clients. Some of these are just businesses I have observed do dumb things. And so I wanted to talk to you about these 7 dumb things so that you avoid making these mistakes if you are currently a business owner or you want to be a future business owner. So let's get started. The first dumbest thing that I have seen happen is a business owner making a bad hiring decision. Too many times, one of the worst things we can do is hire that wrong person. Now, we're all going to have mishires. It's going to happen. But when you spectacularly miss on a hire, it can be bad for your business. I'll give you a great example. I had a client one time who owned an insurance agency, and he saw the resume for this potential employee, and he had all the knowledge that he needed for this specialty area in insurance. And so he shares this resume with me, and I pointed out to him that this person's got a really choppy work history. And so we ended up doing a fit profile to see if this person fit the job for which they were interviewing for, and he wasn't a fit. And I told the client, I said, this guy is not going to work. I can tell right now. This is a bad decision. He says, I don't care. He's got experience. Hired him. 90 days later and thousands of dollars later, he had to fire him. So that was one of the dumb things, that even though it was point blank, obviously, he fell in love with the person instead of seeing that this person fit the job. So the second dumb thing that I have seen is when a business owner refuses to fire bad employees. They're toxic. They're not getting the work done. So many years ago, I was coaching a business owner, and their business was really, really struggling. And the biggest reason is that they were having leads, but the 2 salespeople he had weren't selling anything. Their conversion rate was terrible. They weren't going out and getting leads, doing nothing of that nature. And so him and I agreed, hey, these guys need to get let go. And every week he'd come in the coaching session and says, okay, great, let me know how the termination went with those 2 employees. Oh, I didn't do it. Why? Well, I want to give him another chance. And this went on for weeks upon weeks upon weeks. And finally, he came in after 6 months of trying to get him to fire these employees and said, I hate to tell this to you, Kevin, I'm closing my business and declaring bankruptcy. And I just shook my head. And I knew exactly why this was happening, because these salespeople were just draining money out of their inability to convert leads into customers. And it was sad. So have the courage to let go of toxic and employees and people not doing their jobs. So now the number 3 mistake, biggest mistake I've seen, is not paying attention to finances. If you're a business owner, you need to be on top of what's going on financially in your business and not just looking at the bank account and saying, hey, I got money, I'm happy, or oh, I have no money, I'm sad. I'll give you a real life example of this. I had a client one time and called up our office. They just started coaching with us, and he's saying, I'm out of cash, but I don't understand why. And so we started digging in and scratching below the surface and found out that his daughter-in-law was embezzling money. And she was doing is she would basically input that the tax payments had been made to the federal government for the 940 and 941s, but then would just, not send the money off, and she was also collecting the mail. So when the mail came in, in essence from the IRS going, where's your 940, 941 payments, she just shoved it in a drawer. And then finally one day the IRS shows up and says, we want to talk to the owner. So he had not paid any attention to any of his financials. Fortunately, he was able to recover. It took a couple years to get back on track, but finally got moving. Big time lesson. You've got to pay attention to your finances, whether it's guarding against embezzlement, whether it's just looking at what your margins are in the business to make sure you're making appropriate profits. You got to pay attention to your finances. Now, the number 4 dumbest thing I've seen a business owner do is to spend money on toys instead of reinvesting profits. I had actually it was a client who was ready to come on board with me, and we were going over his finances, and he had a large profit that was showing in his account. And I said, great. Now let's get going to start reinvesting this money. He goes, it's not there anymore. He goes, what do you mean? He goes, yeah, my wife wanted a boat. And I said, a boat? And he goes, yeah, a boat. I said, how much money is that boat going to make you? And he goes, well, it's not. I said, exactly. It was a six-figure for retained earnings that he was going to reinvest into something in his business, and now it's gone. And I said, well, then why don't you liquidate the boat? He goes, well, I can't. I'll probably get my wife to divorce me. Really? Really? And his business basically petered out. When you're making profits, the purpose of profits is reinvestment. You can spend money on toys when the business is solid and in place. Too many business owners, that first big profit report that they get, they want to take that and spend it on toys. Can't do that. Number 5 dumbest thing I've seen a business owner do is refuse to adapt new technology into their business. A lot of these older business owners, and maybe even younger business owners, have well, this is the way we've always done it, we're not going to change. My very first prospective client after I became a business coach, I sat down with him and I was going to say, hey, how are we doing financially in the business? He reaches into his drawer and pulls out a leather-bound debit and credit worksheet that looked like it came from the 1940s. And mind you, this is 2002. And so I was like, okay. And so he wanted to do some mathematics. And he had this hand crank calculator on the side of his desk. And I thought it was just for decorations. And so I want you to add up these numbers here. Oh, no, no, no. He went to that hand crank calculator, punched the numbers in, and pulled the handle back. And so he was complaining about how much time he was spending on doing his books on a daily basis. He's just doing 3 hours a day to do his books. And when I told him about, hey, you can do electronic activities such as QuickBooks, where we can trim that 3 hours down to maybe 15 minutes. He goes, I don't have time. I'm 68 years old. I don't have time to learn new technology. I was like, well, then I can't help you. And so he eventually went out of business because he was never going to adapt technology to keep up with what was going on in the business world. And yeah, he went out of business. The 6th dumbest thing that I have seen business owners do is the inability to enforce quality standards in their work. I see this a lot with creative agencies. There's the creative agencies with marketing websites. They're very creative individuals. They're artists, but they don't have the ability to enforce standards. I had a client one time and he was not able to retain clients. And so why is that the case? Well, come to find out, his team was making horrifically bad mistakes on websites, on marketing strategies. They had no quality control. And his and his team were so enamored in the beauty of these websites, they would spend hours upon hours perfecting the graphics, the color palettes, everything to make the websites beautiful. But a lot of glitches were in place and they were operational. And trying to get him to tighten up quality control, it felt like it was fingers on a chalkboard to him. It was just, and so in essence, it didn't work, and his business struggled with that perception that his business had, that you can have the prettiest website in the world, but if it doesn't work effectively, nobody's going to continue working with you. And then the 7th biggest mistake I have seen business owners do is to pretend that tax issues can be ignored. I'll give you a story. I had a prospective client that I did a complimentary coaching session with, and so we went through all of these issues he was having. He was falling behind on a lot of different issues. And I said, here's what we need to work on. And he said, you need to address this, this, and this. Some of it was tax issues with tax authorities. And he goes, well, come back to me in 6 months. I'll work on that. Came back 6 months later. He hadn't done anything. And I told him, I said, you know what? The Department of Labor isn't going to take this well. You have to get your business back on track so you can start paying all of this tax liability you have. And he goes, well, come back in 3 months. And maybe we'll see if we're ready to work with you then. Came back in 3 months, rolled up to the door, padlock chain on the door with a big red notice from the Department of Labor basically saying, well, you are now closed. And I've seen this so many other times. I mean, that's just one example. I have multiple examples of business owners who, when they get notices from the IRS or from Labor and Industries or whatever, that they just ignore the notice. You can't do that. So, would love to hear your stories. Maybe go in the comment section below. What are dumb things that you have seen business owners do over the years? Kevin Ware, your Action Business Coach. Make sure you're not doing the dumb thing. If you're a business owner, make sure you're not doing the dumb things I talked about today.